My second CEO role was with a 100-year-old family business. Had been very, very successful. It had survived transitions from one generation to the next, all the way to the fifth generation. I was hired as the first non-family member CEO. There were 17 shareholders, all cousins involved. Truly, the most difficult part of my negotiation for my employment agreement was the level of decision-making authority I would have. You see, the business had gotten into trouble. Quite honestly, it was a hot mess. It was losing approximately $100,000 a month. And so I knew that I would have to be able to go in there with complete authority to turn the business around. I spent a week just observing and watching and looking, and I realized very quickly that the root of the problem wasn't the people, it wasn't their product, it wasn't their service, it was their business philosophy. These 17 cousins all had company cars. They all had credit cards, American Express cards. All of them had some sort of paycheck. In fact, one cousin had a $100,000 a year job working in the accounting department, coming to work maybe a couple times a month. So what this business was doing is really putting their family wants ahead of what the business needs were. I call that a family first business. At that same time I was working with that company, I was on a board of directors of another 100-year-old fifth generation business, very successful, with 50 to 70 family shareholders. And they were doing something right. And what they did right is they were always putting the business first. They realized that the business wasn't there to create a lifestyle for the family members. It was there to create value for all the stakeholders of that business. They were very long-term focused. The business started out as one of the first telephone companies in Georgia, and then it ended up becoming a very large telecommunications company, but they had many other satellite businesses as well. They had principles, and their principles were not only on creating value for the community, for their employees, but they wanted to make sure that they got the right people in the right job, and that if there was a family member working in their business, they were very qualified. They had to have the appropriate skills needed to do that job. They had to be paid market wages, and then they had to do performance reviews with their direct supervisor every year, like all other employees. But then they had one other hurdle they had to do. Every year, that family employee had to go in front of the family board of directors for a review. So needless to say, there weren't too many family members actually working in the business. There was 50 to 70 shareholders of the business, but were actually working in the business. There weren't very many, but those that were there, they were the best ones. They were highly qualified. So these business first principles related to compensation, hiring, promoting, that's where they really made a big difference in the success of their business. Now, that experience forced me to rethink family business. You know, most family businesses that we work with and that I talk to, they had this strong desire, this hope that the business will go from one generation to the next. But there's a lot of common research out there that proves that that doesn't happen. It's a fact that 30% of businesses are the only ones that survive to the second generation. And it gets from there, 13% of the businesses will survive to the third generation. And then it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3% can make it through the fourth. And if you get to the fifth generation, it's less than that. It's really remarkable to me. And this is the reality that most owners don't want to talk about. And this is the reality that we try to put on the kitchen table as soon as we can. We try to help these family businesses define, well, what is a prosperous family business? And what we have learned over the years and over many businesses is that these businesses that do survive for multiple generations are very purpose driven. They have long term focus. They're financially sound. They have a proven process and methodology to survive generational transitions. They're continually growing, not just the business, but the overall value of the business. And here's the other one that's really quite remarkable is that they have an ability to preserve family harmony throughout these generational transitions and even in between the generation transitions without eroding the significance or the value of the business itself. So based on my experience and by working with other family businesses. Whether or not you can move from one generation to the next depends on one fundamental decision and six fundamentals of a business. This is the model for our family business prosperity, for being able to create that prosperity that I was talking about. And the one decision that is critically important to answer as soon as you can is, will you be a business first family or a family first business? Once that decision is made, then that becomes the cornerstone for making all other important strategic decisions for that business. And I also have up here these six basic fundamentals that we realize that if these fundamentals are strong and in place and connected to that decision of whether or not being business first or family first, once you have those in place, the business becomes successful for many, many years. It's a hard decision to make. A lot of our clients, when we first talk to them about, well, are you a business first family or family first business? They think about that as something that's values oriented. We believe in God, our family, and football. Those are our priorities. Well, that's not really where we're going. What we're saying is where do you put your priorities? Are you prioritizing, like the business that I came into to turn around? Are you prioritizing your family wants ahead of the business needs? Or are you prioritizing the business needs over your family wants? Very important distinction. So it's really all about choosing priority. The family first business characteristics, so to speak, looks at things like making sure that there's a job for family members, no matter what their expertise is. Remember the cousin that came into the office a couple times a month and earning $100,000, driving a nice luxury car and having a company credit card, not adding value to the business at all. And so a family first business has that characteristic. The other thing about this family business is employees or leaders inherited their jobs. It was a birthright to be the vice president of sales, whether you were qualified or not. But if your father and your grandfather had that role, that was going to be your role. In fact, the fifth generation was actually reluctant to go into that role. Really didn't want to do that. They didn't want to be in the business at all. But for whatever reason, they felt obligated to do it. Some felt entitled to do it. But again, that's putting the family wants ahead of the business needs. If you want to have a business that will continue from one generation to the next, the chances of you breaking those statistics, beating the odds, so to speak, is that you're going to be a business first family. Because if you're a family first business, like the company I was describing at the beginning of this, what happens is you get too many family members standing at the trough. They're constantly taking and consuming from the business. And it's hard to let the business be prosperous and grow. So if I do have a bias, it is because, my personal mission is to help as many family businesses live as long as they can, hopefully forever. Many businesses start off in their early days as a lifestyle business. It's just one or two people, and they are there to take care of the family, no doubt. But as that business grows, as it goes through a life cycle, it can change and it can move philosophically to a business first model. The tricky part is when the businesses kind of are standing in the middle, so to speak. Think about a doorway. They're standing in the threshold of the doorway and it swings back and forth situationally. When it comes to hiring a family member, okay, maybe I'm going to be a family first business. But when it comes to managing compensation or capital, oh, I'm going to be business first. Well, that's a tricky place to be when you're kind of in between the threshold of the doorway. And this is where we try to come in and help actually get a definitive decision. Which one are you going to be? Because if it's constantly changing, it's unsettling for employees. It causes emotional decision making and it thwarts any kind of succession planning. And quite honestly, it does erode the financial health of the company. Making a choice and then standing in that choice is what's critically important. And if you're not sure where you are you family first or business first, look at your business and see if you have a few of these signs or characteristics of your business. Do you have problems with your shareholders on what your company's purpose is, what's its big idea, what is the North Star, where the company's going. Do you even know where the company is going? Do you have strong leadership succession plans? Or are you still being held back by what great grandfather said he wanted you to do? How about retaining employees? Do some of your key leaders in your business feel like they get to a ceiling and they can't get promoted because they don't have the same last name as what's on the building? Do you see money from the business going into supporting a lifestyle for the family? What's the political architecture like? What's the level of accountability for family members working in the business? For yourself, if you're running the business? How do you feel about putting structure in your business, putting some good governance practices? Is that something that worries you? Do you feel like that's over corporatizing and you don't need it? If you weren't working in your family business, what would you do? Would you lose your identity? Can you let go of key decisions and let others, maybe more competent than you, make those decisions? If any of those signs resonate with you, if any of those characteristics resonate with you, most likely then you're a family first business. And then the opposite would be for a business first family. But the thing is when you make that choice and you make that choice and stand in that choice, your employees are going to feel a lot better about it. Your customers are going to feel better about it because they see that there is actual longevity in place. You'll be able to have more fruitful conversations and healthy debates with your family members and non-family members that are running the company because everybody knows that you're grounded in a business first family philosophy, and it's okay to have a voice even when your last name isn't the family's last name. It will help you grow, it'll help you increase your overall value, and it will certainly help you transition that legacy from one generation to the next. How do you get to that decision? Well, if you have multiple shareholders, it is a little more challenging. If it's just you, you declare it. You declare it and you start living in it. Most of the time when we're working with family businesses, there's multiple shareholders. And so we have to get all the shareholders together. We have to have them all. It can't just be the second generation. The founding generation has to be there if they're still active and alive. A little note on this, even if they're not active, but they still have shares, we certainly bring that first generation in. So all shareholders of the business need to be involved. We walk through the process with them individually first through individual interviews, online questionnaires, and then we take these inputs, so to speak, and that helps us frame up our group conversations of how we're going to facilitate the difficult pinch points, so to speak, because we now have a better idea of everybody's perspective and viewpoint of where the company should be going or where it should be going or where somebody perceives there's friction and another member is not even aware of the friction. When we get in there, we were able to have constructive conversations, yes, debates, but at the end of the day, we come out with a common decision that's consensually made, and it has to be consensually made. We call it a slap the table moment in our company, where we get everybody to consensually agree to a philosophy statement. And it typically starts off as, we are a business first family. And then they write it and then they agree with it. And then they actually share it and they share it with their employees because that's the way for them to be held accountable. The more people that know about it, the higher level of accountability you get in your organization. And as that accountability increases, so does trust. It's not always a cakewalk. Let me tell you, even after the decision is made, particularly if there's many shareholders, things go awry. Human beings are human beings. It is possible for the implementation of that decision to get off the rails a little bit. And usually what it is that we have found is it's a confusion between harmony and health of the business. In other words, many times families will say, well, I'm just not going to bring that up. That's a sensitive topic. Well, but it might be a very important topic to the health of the business, whether it was a customer issue or could be a cash flow issue. But because this family member is thinking with their heart, they feel like, well, it's better to be silent. And then in the long run, that actually becomes destructive. That becomes the big elephant in the room nobody wants to talk about. The other kind of area that we see unintentionally disrupts the implementation of a business first family philosophy is this need to protect the next generation. I don't want my son to know the true financial condition of the business because if he did, it would scare him to death. That's not helping. What would be more helpful is preparing the next generation, not protecting the next generation. Another big unintended sabotage to implementation of the business first philosophy is the founder's identity is all wrapped up in the business. It's their baby. I was just talking to a prospect today. The woman was saying, "Look, this is my baby. I've been nurturing it and I've been growing it. I didn't make any money from it for the first 5 years. I'm now finally making money and I want to do this and that." So the founder's identity gets all wrapped up in their business, even though they know intellectually they want to move towards this business first philosophy. They want to implement these six fundamentals in their business, but they just can't let go because it's theirs. And that's because their identity is wrapped up in it. Another one is just avoiding any kind of structure in their business, putting in best practices around governance. And we'll usually get the pushback, oh, you're corporatizing me. I don't want to be corporatized. That's not it at all, right? It's just helping everybody be more accountable, levels up the trust in the organization, and improves the probability of success. Another trait that will impede the implementation of this philosophy is just nothing, doing nothing, waiting. It's very common for one generation to say to the next, "Hey, my father didn't do it for me, so I'm not going to do it for you. You guys figure out how succession planning is going to work. You figure out how to handle that cousin. I'm not going to do it." They treat succession emotionally versus strategically. They're asking the wrong questions. They're asking questions like, who deserves it? Who wants it? Who's going to volunteer to be the leader? Instead, who can actually lead this thing? Who has the leadership capacity and capabilities? What kind of leader does this business really need? Maybe it's nobody in the family. Those characteristics will impede your implementation. And if any of those resonate with you, you might think about that a little bit more. But when we do implement this business first philosophy, it's interesting what changes. First of all, we get clarity in roles. We shift from making decisions autocratically or maybe making decisions democratically to actually making decisions based and rooted in facts and decisions made by the most appropriate people at the appropriate level in the company. So they're decentralized decisions versus centralized. We see the next generation coming into the business having certain thresholds or measures that they have to attain to be able to even be considered to come into the business. Kind of like the little checklist that I gave you about the other family business I was working for. One of the requirements that they had, which was great, was if somebody in their family wanted to work in the business, they had to have experience at least 5 years with a non-family business. They had to go out into the world, so to speak, prove themselves and learn from other businesses. The other interesting characteristic or trait that they had is that if you wanted to work in the family business, you needed to have not only a college degree, but you had to have an advanced degree, a master's, so to speak. I was helping a family write their family constitution, and that became a point of contention. Some of the siblings were discussing it and debating it, and the patriarch was sitting in the kind of the corner of the room, just observing his kids talking about, well, I don't think that's fair. My child's maybe not going to go to college, or my child may not want to go get a master's degree, or may not want to go to a business school. So the other siblings were trying to, okay, well, yeah, maybe we need to lower the bar. And as soon as that was said, that's where the patriarch leaned in and he looked at his kids and he said, look, in order for us to be a strong, healthy company, not for this generation, but for your children's grandchildren's generation, we have to continuously get better. We have to raise the bar, not lower the bar for a family member. And just because they're not working in the business doesn't mean they can't have ownership in the business. They can't benefit. They can still benefit from the business, but we want the best, the brightest, the most talented people running our business and making decisions, whether that's a family member or a non family member. So the patriarch understood where he was trying to go with his definition of prosperity and the kind of legacy he wanted to leave. The business first implementation, to really top it all off, is it becomes something that frees up leadership to actually make things happen. It allows the owners to decentralize their decision making process and grow faster than what the founder thought he could do. I was at a customer sales meeting yesterday. 100 people were in attendance. The owner has transitioned out of the business, was there as a guest, and he made a comment that, he never wanted to let go of the wheel. He wanted to make every decision. But once he declared himself a business first family and he started implementing some of our best practices in those 6 fundamentals, he was amazed at not only how much better the business did and performed, but the fuller the life he had, the amount of time he could spend with family, grandchildren, go on vacations, do the things that he always had aspired to do, but he forgot about. And so once that's in place, it becomes freeing, is the way it's explained to me. I talked to you about this business that, had the cousins, the 17 cousins. And, on my second week there, I asked everybody to come to my office and bring their car keys, bring their American Express cards. They all lost their jobs except for two that were actually qualified family members. And I explained to them that we have transitioned to a business first family. And I didn't give them the opportunity to weigh in on it and collaborate and make a choice. I was given that authority by their board of directors to make that choice for them. And I remember one of the cousins, a nice elderly gentleman, came up to me and said, I really advocated with everybody that we hire you. And now I'm having second thoughts about it. I smiled. I said, I understand, but do you understand where we're trying to go? Do you understand the importance of turning this business around and letting this business be once again prosperous again for not just the family, but for the employees and for the community? He said, yep, I get it. I certainly get it. And we did. Moral of the story is eventually the business turned itself around and the value increased, and the cousins wanted to sell the business after 100 years. And so that is exactly what we did do. If you're serious about long-term prosperity and you want to be more focused on the next generation, not just your own needs, then yeah, you ought to take a look at answering this question honestly. See if you're standing in that doorway. See if you just feel safer by changing your attitude and mind, or if you really want to create a legacy that lasts for multiple generations. If you're putting harmony ahead of good business practices, you should be thinking twice about that. Family first feelings without business first standards, they're not going to protect your legacy. It's just only going to erode it.